This inaugural episode of I Finally Played is a bit of a misnomer, because the truth is I started playing Tunic over a year ago. I got about 5 hours in and remember being impressed with the game's design in pretty much every critical facet, but for some reason I ended up just dropping it and moving on to other things, letting this well-crafted adventure sit installed on my PC untouched. A little over a full year went by until one night that subtle text reading "last played 372 days ago" caught my eye, and I decided to boot it up again. The only problem was, Tunic is not exactly the type of game you can just jump back into. As I started roaming its enigmatic world, I was completely lost. I remembered a handful of bits to it, certain landmarks, even a few hidden paths, but I had no idea if where I was going is where I was supposed to be. I forgot what many of the items actually did, and I just had absolutely no sense of momentum. I was wandering through a game that on the surface encourages wandering, but in truth what it really encourages is a sort of intelligent prodding, a detail-oriented form of exploration that only works if you have context, knowledge, and a sense of how each moment you encounter has built upon the last. After a bit of highly unintelligent prodding on my part, I recognized that what I was doing wasn't going anywhere, so I closed out to the main menu and hit the New Game button. Listen, it never feels good to abandon several hours of progress in any endeavor, be it a video game or any other type of project. But in the case of Tunic, this was absolutely the best thing I could have done to play the game how it was meant to be played, and ultimately become engrossed in a full and focused playthrough. So that's what I did. This is not a review, not an analysis, just some thoughts that stuck with me when I finally played Tunic. The magic of Tunic is really derived from two things: its delicately intertwined world, and its fantastic pacing that steers the player through that world with a minimal amount of explicit information. Everything that you achieve while playing Tunic, every new area accessed, every puzzle solved, every hidden secret uncovered, all of it feels like it could only ever happen because of your own efforts. Tunic is a game in which you get out of it what you put in. At times it can require patience, or concentration, or sometimes just deliberate moments to simply stop and think. And the style of game that this approach creates is not going to be for everyone, or at the very least, it's not going to be for every mindset. In fact, I'm now pretty certain that the reason I stopped playing Tunic during my original attempt at it was because I wasn't in the right mindset. I wasn't ready to take this game for what it is. But if you are in that place, and you're the type of person who appreciates a solid combination of adventure and analysis, Tunic is probably going to be a highly enjoyable experience for you. This game's sort of trademark component is its use of an in-game instruction booklet that you'll collect pages of throughout your adventure. Some of those pages include basic information about controls or abilities, others contain cryptically disguised hints, and many feature helpful hand-drawn maps of different regions. One of the things I found interesting about those map pages specifically is that although you'll certainly refer to them at certain points to get your bearings, Tunic paradoxically implements this old-school navigation system while at the same time creating world exploration in which most of the time you don't really even feel like looking at the map. The world is small enough and valid pathways are limited enough that even when you're aimlessly wandering, you'll never be lost for long, and it's refreshing to just let your own instincts guide you rather than following a map marker. The largely orthogonal environments are connected in a very careful manner. Every pathway has a purpose. In the overworld in particular, there are almost always multiple routes you can take to get to the different regions, so you never really feel like you're hitting a dead end, even if you're not on the most direct path. In many games, traveling in the wrong direction feels like a waste of time. In Tunic, it truly feels more like learning where not to go. Now, I don't want to oversell things here. Yes, Tunic's presentation of its world, its puzzles, its guidance are unusual and often thought-provoking, but this is still a pretty accessible title. Once you gain the necessary momentum to work your way through the game, I don't think it's likely that many people will get stuck or be truly stumped by most of the situations they'll encounter, at least not throughout the main quest. Things certainly take a turn towards the end of the game as far as puzzle complexity goes, but at its heart, this is still a classic action-adventure game that just happens to be set in a dense, cryptic world. I also don't want to undersell the amount of thought and care that has to go into crafting an experience like that. Tunic actually reminds me a lot of Metroid Prime in this sense. An odd comparison maybe, but they're both very much momentum-based games in that they have you traversing through their worlds, one puzzle, one fight, one stretch of exploration at a time, in a way that takes effort, but as an experience sort of feels effortless. And that's a feeling that's pretty rare in games, even ones that strategically and effectively utilize pacing to their advantage. Now, gameplay that features a cool modern take on old school gaming staples, no matter how clever it can be, isn't going to save any title from being messy or unenjoyable or boring. So of course it helps that all of Tunic's eccentricities are presented in a package that's very polished and very smooth. The visuals are super clean, and outside of some intentionally shrouded pathways, it's always easy to identify things like enemy attacks or objects that can be interacted with. Character movement is responsive and allows the game to continue to feel good to play for its full duration despite the limited number of actions and abilities you'll be using. And of course, the soundtrack does a fantastic job at finding the exact junction of classic fantasy and curious oddity that embodies the entire Tunic experience. And that curious oddity piece was important for me, because one of my favorite sort of ancillary features of a game is the ability to introduce bizarre components into worlds we think we've seen before. Control takes a frankly boring office building setting and flips it on its head with paranormal shifting geometry. The Witness takes place on an idyllic island environment with beautiful, colorful scenery, but it's also eerily void of life, and every now and then you just run into a weird statue or an unexplained audio log or some other strange piece that gets you to start asking questions about its setting. Tunic does this same thing with its story scenes that are almost celestial in tone, its scattered alien-looking architecture, and eventually its entire setting, resulting in theming that ends up being much more mystical than classic fantasy. From the moment Tunic was revealed, it drew comparisons to older Legend of Zelda games, and rightfully so, as it takes some clear inspirations from those titles. But as with most everything else Tunic does, its world and story deliver a modern take on Zelda's more abstract moments, creating its own brand of fantasy adventure that differentiates itself from its influences. One thing that I think is often overlooked in the Zelda series is just how freaking weird it is sometimes. I mean, look at this guy, or this guy. Or this guy. Tunic turns that particular knob up even higher, and by the end of the game you find yourself in a world that's far beyond the classic washed up on a beach scenario that begins your journey. It's an adventure that is built from top to bottom to facilitate this thematic transition. And just like its world design and its satisfying pacing, it's all implemented with incredible intentionality. There are experiences all around us that tend to reach a higher level of impact when conditions are right, when learning is embraced, and when mindset aligns with motive. And this is perhaps even more true in video games than any other medium of entertainment. Playing a spooky horror game at night with the lights off can enhance feelings of tension and fear. Becoming immersed in a grand adventure through a stunning world can leave a larger mark during times when real life feels stagnant or discouraging. And exploring a title that requires focus, observation, and momentum will always be at its best when you're able to give it your full attention. Tunic is without a doubt one of those games. You don't have to be in the perfect mindset to enjoy it, but I'm positive that the experience is upgraded quite a bit when you are. So if there are any games sitting in your catalog that you've tried and liked but put down without really knowing why, this is your invite to approach it from a new angle at a new time in your life. If you're lucky like I was when I finally played Tunic, things might be different this time. Hey, thanks for watching. This is the first in a series of shorter videos that I've been working on as a way to just document my thoughts on some backlog games as I finally get around to playing them. It's been a nice way to break up some of the longer, more analytical content as I continue to work on that as well. So if you enjoyed this one, do me a favor and like this video, subscribe if you're really into this stuff, and let me know your thoughts on your experience with Tunic or any other cryptic action-adventure titles like it. See you next time.